UFOs, ghosts, ancient civilizations, the supernatural. We may never know the truth about what's really going on, but it sure is fun to speculate.
This is Factor Theory Live with your host, Stephen Crawford.
You know, if you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel. Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days and see what a difference it makes in your smoking enjoyment? See how Camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good-tasting a cigarette can be.
All right, welcome to Factor Theory Live. I'm Steve Crawford, and I am here with a special guest. Been trying to get him on for a while, and we got everything figured out at the last second. Let me bring this up. Dr. Bruce Maccabee. This guy has been around for a long time. He is an optical physicist. He was employed by the Navy, and he is a leading ufologist. He was doing work on the investigations were on like the Kenneth Arnold sighting, Trent, Oregon, the Trent photos from McMinnville, Gemini 11 astronaut photos, the Tehran UFO incident, Gulf Breeze incident, Phoenix Lights. Like, this gentleman has been around and he knows how to use the toys to let us know if this stuff is legit or not. Bruce, how the heck are you tonight, Mr. Bruce Maccabee?
Well, I'm not too bad. How about you?
Pretty good. It's really, really warm here. How's the temperatures where you're living?
It's cooled down some. We've been having a big heat wave, but that seems to have diminished somewhat.
That's fantastic. Okay. Now, you had mentioned you had just did, was it an article? There was something you had mentioned you wanted to talk about, and I figured let's get right into that right away, and then I'll ask you some of my questions. There was something about the History Channel, was it?
Well, the History Channel had a series about UFO investigation, and they had their most recent episode last night, Saturday night. And one of the things they keep talking about is, this is the thing that this program has that various other programs don't have is a number of formerly high-ranking officials, I guess you could say, in whatever jobs they do. Anyway, this guy, Luis Elizondo, is sort of like running the program. He was one of the people involved in leaking the Tic Tac and the three UFO videos that were taken by Navy pilots.
Right.
2004 and then 2015, and released to the New York Times in December of 2017, and have been a subject of discussions since then, with the assumption that there are more videos to come out sometime, but all they're giving us right now is the three. And also, we have information from the radar people, and I had a long discussion with one of the radar guys, Kevin Day, to get some interesting information on how these things move. But anyway, one of the subjects that they emphasize all the time is how how these strange objects differ from normal objects that might be flying around. And they call these various, what I would call characteristics, they call observables, things that you can observe about these craft that make them different from other stuff. And if you go to my Facebook, plug Bruce Maccabee into your URL bar, the search bar in your Facebook, go to my Facebook, the front page of it, or whatever you call it. You can scan down where I posted a comment. I posted it last night. A comment about the show that occurred last night. Last night being Saturday night, the 11th.
Fantastic.
And in this thing that I posted, it lists the observables that they claim distinguish some objects. And these are always being presented as if it were something new, something that they were the first people to think of this sort of stuff. To us who have been around for a long time, it's sort of amusing. And I showed, I posted, first of all, the description that they gave of these observables. And then I posted another description of observables. Extreme acceleration, weird shape, no contrail, no wings, no engines, nothing recognizable about the craft that are seen. So I posted. I have essentially two descriptions of observables. The first description that I give is from the people who are doing investigations now, the Navy people, and so on. Then the second description, if you read, you may be wondering, well, where did this description come about? It talks about things suddenly appearing as if dropping down from a high altitude and disappearing as if high speed or complete disintegration and various other things. And then I said, oh, guess what? This second description of observables was in a Air Force intelligence document, part of the Blue Book file from way back in 1947.
Right.
And
that's pretty.
Bottom line is, the observables that they had back in 1947 are the same ones that we have today. And so I asked the question: Have we learned anything in the last 73 years?
Yeah, I don't think they. Well, I mean, they had to have. Actually, I wanted to ask you. Do you still get to play with all the toys to check out? Like, did you get a chance to look at those videos under some equipment at all? Like the Tic Tacs and stuff. I mean.
I don't have what I had available when I was at work.
Okay. And now
I can still do some. I can still do some analysis.
Right, you have a few things.
In a lot of cases, the modifications you make to the pictures to bring things out, you could have seen anyway if you knew how to look.
Yeah.
But these techniques make them more obvious, so that somebody doesn't have to spend a lot of time saying, "Oh, look at." Like for example, a guy sent me some pictures of lights in the sky. And I'm looking at the main pictures themselves, and you can see some bright dots, and that's about all in these formats. So I do some modification of the brightness and contrast, and I bring out something that looks like a tail on one of these lights, a wiggly tail with bright dots at various places in the tail, as if there was some light flashing on and off and moving through the atmosphere, flashing on and off and moving at a good speed so that you see the individual flashes. Whereas if it were a steady light, that is steady, not moving at all, you wouldn't know that it's actually flashing unless you had a high speed, a high frame rate camera.
Right.
Videotaping it with.
What was when it came to the Gemini photos? You got a chance to look at those, right? What was the thing that first stood out when you laid eyes on those?
Well, I had seen the pictures. There was a story published in Popular Mechanics or Mechanics Illustrated or one of those magazines
Right.
back in the latter 60s. I forget, 66, 60, 67, 68, 69, somewhere in there, I think it was, or maybe early 70s.
Right.
But the point is that the article said it didn't believe the Gemini astronauts in September of 1966, while orbiting the Earth, had seen some object pass by sort of underneath their track.
Right.
There weren't many satellites up there in those days, and you wouldn't expect to see anything close by.
Yeah, there was no space junk, so.
There was a little bit of space junk, but not like it is now.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, they saw this thing coming, and they took a couple of pictures of it. The Gemini 2, or Gemini 11, if you want to call it that. Windows on those Gemini craft were not high quality, and so there's some distortion, and you see bright areas that have some sort of a shape, and it seems to change orientation as it traveled along. But the main thing is that it was close to them, or they wouldn't have been able to see it at all. And close.
Right.
There's so much volume and space up there that for any two things to get close is unusual. So anyway,
Definitely, yeah.
the NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, was given the job of identifying what it was that the Gemini crew had seen. And they, after a day of thinking about it, NORAD came back with an explanation that it was a booster rocket from a Russian Soviet missile launch. It had put a Russian satellite into orbit, but the body of the rocket itself was now in a decaying orbit. And so they decided that that's what the Gemini astronauts saw. And they said, NORAD said it was 200 and some miles away. Well, the person who wrote the article in Mechanics Illustrated, or whichever it was, Science and Mechanics, the person who wrote the article said it seemed a little strange that you could see something 200 and some miles, as I recall.
Right.
He raised a question as to whether it could be true. So I started thinking about it myself, and I went to the trouble of actually learning how to do orbital calculations. So I calculated the orbit of the Proton 3 booster, which was what it was identified as, and the orbit of the Gemini 11 satellite. It took quite a while because I had to learn how to do all these orbital mechanics, and then
I guess
use the data to do a calculation. But what it boiled down to was this object was the Proton 3. Well, the object was out there front and left as they were traveling along, and they were heading towards Africa. They were traveling towards the east. They had just gone over the ocean, and they were heading towards Africa when this thing appeared to their left and went underneath them. It turns out that the Proton 3 booster was 3,000 miles away, approximately, behind them in the wrong direction. So there was no way that that's what it was.
Right.
Nobody was ever able to positively identify it. One guy thought it might be a package that they had ejected from the Gemini spacecraft, a package of trash, and the package of trash going into another orbit and coming around the Earth, eating the Gemini 11 on the other side, you might say.
Wow. And he said it with a straight face?
That's the only possibility. But as far as astronaut cases are concerned, since you bring it up, the one that I like is the Skylab 3 in September of 1973. Skylab was the first laboratory in space.
Mm-hmm.
And the third group of astronauts to be into that satellite. By that time, we could have one satellite, have people in one satellite get into the other satellite because of good coupling devices, a couple of satellites together. Anyway, the Skylab 3 astronauts saw some red object and took 4 pictures, which show a red. 3 of them show a red dot, and the 4th one shows a structure, which, in my opinion, could not be due to camera shake. You'd have to see the pictures, and you can do that on my website. You can see both the Gemini 11 and the Skylab 3. There were no red satellites, and this satellite, this thing, whatever it was not being illuminated by redness from the sun, reddening of the atmosphere, reddening of the sunlight by the atmosphere. This thing was high up above that, so we don't know what it was. It was nobody's come up with a potential solution, because, as I said, there were satellites in those days in particular were either silvery metal or painted black or white. There weren't any colors. So that's sort of
pretty what was that? I'm on your site right now.
Yeah, brumac.mysite.com. BRUMAC.MYSITE.com.
Fantastic. I'm gonna post it in the chat room right now. There we go. Okay. All right. Now, Kenneth Arnold. I've wondered, because I've seen pictures of what he described he saw, and you got to investigate that somewhat. Have you heard of any other ship being spotted that looked like the ones he described?
Well, there was one photographed in Phoenix a couple of weeks after.
Oh, really? Okay.
But there haven't been a lot of sightings. He described not there being 9. He thought it was 9 objects, and 8 of them were like mostly circular with a sort of a pointed convex rear end, and one of them had a double arc at the rear side. That he thought that because it was different from the others, it was the most important one in his impression, and so he emphasized this one, and it's the one that you see in most publications. Arnold holding a model of this thing with a double cusp at the rear end.
Right.
But they said that was only one of these objects that flew by. 8 of them were like drawing a circle, but not completing a circle at the back end. Instead, putting a shallow triangle at the back end. Now, I have spent quite a bit on the Arnold case, and even wrote a book about it. It's the only book devoted to the Kenneth Arnold case, which was surprising to me, considering the Kenneth Arnold case has been around since the beginning, so to speak.
Yes. It was pretty much the one that got the ball rolling to get everybody looking in the sky, at least.
What?
That's the one that got everybody looking up in the sky, at the very least.
Yeah, and because he was sort of the right man at the right time in the right place with the right attitude, people took him seriously.
Yeah.
They didn't necessarily think that these were, they were thinking it could be Soviet craft or our secret craft or something like that.
Right, he wasn't claiming aliens. Right.
They didn't just reject his description. And his approach to it was, fortunately, very cut and dried, you might say. A whole bunch of things are traveling along, and he realizes that they're going at extremely high speed. So he says to himself, "Well, I wonder how fast they're going." And he says to himself, if he's southwest of Mount Rainier at the time, heading east in this little plain, and he can see that if these things continue down this chain of mountains, starting at Mount Baker at the northern border of the state of Washington, and then crossing in front of him and Mount Rainier, and then going past Mount Adams, 50 miles south of him. He lucked out in that he did take this straight line path, and he was able to time how long it took for them to go past Mount Rainier and then go past the time it took them to get to Mount Adams. It was a pretty reasonable technique he used. He had a clock on the dashboard of his airplane, and so he was able to time these things from when they were past Mount Rainier to when they passed Mount Adams. And he came up with, that's about 50 miles, he came up with 102 seconds. That corresponds to about 1,700 miles an hour, which he couldn't believe. He tried to pick apart his data gathering. That maybe they weren't exactly where he thought they were. He somehow didn't time it correctly or whatever. But anyway, he also did a comparison in size with a DC-3 or some airplane that was flying northward, which was to his left and behind. It was northwest of him, and he found that he thought it was maybe 15 miles away, and he used a device to measure the angular size of this plane at 15 miles, and then he compared that with the angular size of the objects at about the same distance, he thought, maybe 20 miles, and they came up with the same comparable size. So we're talking about 60 to 100 feet or something like that. These measurements that he made and his careful description of what he saw, the flashing lights, bright flashes were what attracted his attention. And his description was sort of cut and dried and never changed. I wrote a book called 3 Minutes in June, which are the 3 minutes that he saw these objects from too far to his north, his left as he's heading east, to when they passed Mount Adams. I collected 4 different, he sort of interviewed, they were interviews, but he sort of interviewed himself because he would just talk about what happened in a linear historical manner. I took 4 of these. The first description he gave the day after on the radio, then when he wrote to the Army Air Force, they wanted him to give a complete description of his sighting, and then 2 more later on. These are all 4 interviews essentially, and they're all giving you the same information. His story didn't change. He just kept it as cut and dried as he could.
That's pretty cool. So you actually got to sit there and talk with him.
No, I didn't get to sit there and talk with him. Oh, you
didn't? Okay.
He died in 1980 something or other. I never actually met him. I'm talking about interviews that other people did.
Ah, okay.
So anyway, you can get to read the story 4 times. Once the day after, once about 2 weeks after. Then there was a interview, or his book. In the book that he wrote, The Coming of the Saucers, was the 3rd interview that I used. And finally, his statements at the MUFON Symposium in 1977 or something. I guess it was 77. So you can get to see if his story changed at all, which it didn't over this long period of time.
That's pretty cool. I should look up check out that book, because I wound up losing all of my library, and I wanted to stock up, so I want to get a couple of your books. I want to get some of Stanton's as well. We are getting close to a break here. What was the name of your website one more time, Bruce?
BRUMAC, Brumac, dot mysite, mysite.com.
Brusac.mysite.com. Okay, so in about 1 minute, when we come back, there's two things that, when we first come back, I want to get into the McMinnville Trent photo from 1950, and then I wanted to discuss Billy Meyer, and that music is going to pop on any second. I hate when I'm 30 seconds short. And people listening, make sure you remember we are 100% listener supported. So scroll down to Patreon, become a patron, and go up, click donations, or go to the store. We'll see you on the other side. Quick break, Bruce.
And it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be going back to the moon for a number of technical reasons and exploration reasons. And then after that, Mars, maybe high orbit in Venus atmosphere, maybe going to Europa. There's all kinds of targets to go to, places of interest in our solar system. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
All right, welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Bruce Maccabee. Bruce, did you hear that clip?
Yes.
That was astronaut Don Pettit. I just wanted to get your opinion on it. He says that we've pretty much destroyed that technology, and they don't know how to get it back, or it's a painful process to build it back. Are you, there's a lot of people out there who, as you have heard, do not think the moon landing happened. As an optical physicist, what is your opinion on the Apollo moon landing? Did it happen or not, in your opinion?
It happened.
Okay. Now, so you're not convinced at all by any of the like Bart Sabrell had come out showing all kinds of videos and audio and pictures. So you think there is like, so one of the things was they were saying they got some great pictures, like too great considering the gloves they were wearing. So as an optical physicist, you think that that's perfect? That would be something that would come up, because somebody else had also mentioned that, well, you know, they took a whole lot of pictures and a lot of them were bad, and they just showed us the best ones. Would you back that assertion?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to look at all the pictures.
Okay.
It's not.
So
it's not
that's just something you really haven't actually pursued. Okay.
It's not been something that I have investigated. I've confined my time to analyzing, studying cases near the Earth.
Okay. Now, back to that, I said before the break, I wanted to find out your impressions about the McMinnville Trent photos from 1950. When you first saw them, what did you think?
That was 1950.
Yep, 1950.
May 11th, 1950. Well, first of all, the Trent case is interesting because it's a make or break case. It's either a real thing or a hoax. There's no halfway point.
Right.
So if you can prove that it's not a hoax, then it has to be real. And what attracted my attention to the Trent case was the William Hartman, who was the photo analyst for the Condon Commission.
Okay.
Condon studied in 1968-69 at the University of Colorado, and William Hartman was a guy who tackled a number of photo cases. The only photo case that he essentially endorsed was the Trent case. As I said, you can merely look at the shape of the object, and the angular size is so large you can clearly see what it looks like, circular with a sort of a pole on the top. It's either the real thing or a hoax. So when Hartman went there, talked to the Trents, went to the site and did some theoretical calculations and so on, and claimed that all factors investigated seemed to point towards the idea that an extraordinary flying object had passed within the site of the Trents, and they had taken 2 pictures of it. And he said in his conclusion on this case that he couldn't absolutely prove that it wasn't a hoax, but everything he looked at seemed to be consistent with a real object going by and photos being taken. So that was published in the Conham Report, which came out at the end of 1968. And you would think that with getting the endorsement of a conventional astronomer who did study of that is William Hartman, who did the study of the Trent case, for him to come out and say that it seemed to be real, you'd think that it would cause a zillion other scientists to try to find out if he was right or not. Well, for those of you who go back that far, you may remember that there were sightings in flaps of sightings from 1947 onwards and into the 60s, and higher than ordinary number of sightings in 65 and 66, or what got Congress interested and directed the Air Force to hold an independent investigation, an investigation independent of Project Blue Book, which was going at the time. Mm-hmm. And that independent investigation was run by Condon, and William Hartman was their photo analyst, and they published the Condon study report with William Hartman's analysis in it. And except for that, Condon tried to play down everything that was unknown. The people who did the various parts of the investigation did run into unexplainable cases, and nevertheless, Condon, who wrote the executive summary of this report, said basically that there wasn't anything of value in continuing the research on UFOs. Nothing unusual had been found. Everything had been explained. He passed over the Trent case very quickly. Anyway, after the Condon report was published, the number of sightings per unit time diminished considerably, and I guess the world sort of thought that, well, that was the end of UFOs. There wasn't going to be any more sightings. And the sighting rate did go down. Only people interested in the subject, who had communications among each other, or monthly newsletters or whatever. Only people who were really interested in the subject knew that the sightings had not died completely. It just had gotten very low. But then in the summer of 1973, something happened in the late summer, and it was like, we're back. There were dozens of sightings in the southeast and working their way up into the mid section of the country. And there were a couple of very famous. One sighting was the Hickson Parker abduction, which Parker has been recently very vocal about the whole thing. He published his book. He laid low for 20 or 30 years after that event, and then finally decided he would let somebody help him write a book on it. And then there was the Mansfield, Ohio, Coyne, a helicopter driven by Captain Larry Coyne, which was lifted by a UFO, it appears. That sighting made national news, and the Hickson Parker abduction made national news. That sort of brought the subject back from the doldrums where it had been since 1970 because of the conclusion of Edward Condon. In 1973, then, you get this big thrust of UFOs, and evidently they hadn't gone away forever, so it was at that point that I decided to try to take a positive attitude and do some research on my own.
Right.
And I was aware that the photo case, the Trent photo case, was sort of like hadn't been explained by Hartman, and since nobody had taken up on it, I decided to try it. If I'd known what I was getting into, I probably would have taken a nap instead.
Yeah.
Anyway, in 1974, I managed to locate the original negatives and began my investigation, which I sort of duplicated and improved upon the theory that Hartman had used to estimate the distance of the object. But Hartman's theory had been had been criticized by a well-known anti-ufologist, Philip Glass, and friend.
Right.
They claimed that it was a big hoax, and they listed a couple of things that had to do with the photography, and in particular, one item that had to do with the optics of the camera made it possible for William Hartman's theory of the distance measurement to be wrong because of something wrong with the lens of the camera. I looked into that very carefully and found that there was another thing that everybody, Hartman and Schaefer both had ignored, which had to do with the brightness of shadows under the eaves. Anyway, this is all presented in gory detail in a couple of papers on my website. Anyway, I started analyzing and showed that the phenomenon called veiling glare, which made Hartman's calculation essentially wrong. There was another correction factor that had to be worked into it that neither Hartman nor Schaefer had thought of, a correction factor having to do with shadow brightness. And once that was plugged in, I came back to the result that Hartman had, that the object was several thousand feet away, but it certainly wasn't a 6-inch diameter something or other hanging from a wire overhead, which is the
right.
explanation offered by all the critics.
Well, that's their job, to come up with the stupidest thing they could possibly think. Oh, it's just a hubcap on a string. That's it. And then the sad thing is a lot of people bought it, though. They wanted to buy it. They didn't want to believe that we're being visited by people that could possibly wipe us out should they get the urge.
Well, the Trent case was a learning experience for me, as I learned a lot about photography that I didn't know.
That's
and
good.
How to make measurements of it, and atmospheric theory. And I also talked to Mrs. Trent a number of times on the phone, and she never used the term flying saucer. Whenever I talked to her, she was more interested in talking about what was happening with her family than what I was trying to spend my telephone time on. They died in 1995 and 1996, keeping their stories, the same story every time. If you go to the bottom of you have to go off on the left-hand side of my website. Near the top on the left-hand side, it says more papers, I think it is, where you go to another section and go to the bottom of the section, and you get a couple of papers on the Trent case itself.
Towards the bottom here? Oh, yep, there they are. Trent Farm photos. Okay.
Right. And one of those papers is sort of a not so technical. One of them is very technical in calculating the distance of the object. The other paper is more of it's got some technicality to it, but it's more of an evaluation type of paper. And working in the witness testimony and what a number of other people who had interviewed the Trents, what they thought, and so on, and sort of brought up to date as of the year 2000 or so. When I first got a hold of those Trent negatives in 1974, I asked Mr. Trent if I could keep them for a couple of weeks for analysis. 25 years later.
When was the last time you were on the site, Bruce? Because I'm clicking on it and it keeps saying like 501 error. No matter which link I click on, 503 service unavailable. It says.
I don't know exactly what you're looking at.
I'm on. Well, hang on a second. Actually, yeah, I forgot to share that. And do that and minimize this. Okay, now, yeah, on your site. I'm on there now. I went into papers, and I went down to the Trent Farm photos, and it's just not bringing it up. It says 503 error. Service unavailable.
I'm looking at it right now.
That's messed up. It could just be me, though. There is a storm going on around here right now. So
you do have, well, when you click on,
go back home. There we go.
More papers. Okay,
No, I'll do it again because I am having bad weather right now. It could be that's going on. Okay, yeah, because I never saw these pictures before, so that's probably what was going on.
I click on papers. It's on the left-hand side. You see my picture. Then you see home, contact, bio, papers, other online articles. It doesn't do anything.
Well, that's good. Okay, it is working though. It was just me that was messed up. It's working now.
Okay, you get papers, and then you see New York Academy of Voodoo Science.
Okay, down near the bottom. Paper.
Top of the papers clip.
Oh, top of the papers clip?
And when you click on papers, you might have to go home first.
Yeah, you know what? My computer's messing up anyway. But for everybody else, yeah, make sure you go check out Bruce's site and go click on papers and check out everything he's got in here. Not just the one. Check it all out because it's all noteworthy.
Papers is one section, you might say. But if you go to home, which is where you get when you first click in, you see home, welcome to my website, and then you go down a ways and you see sighting reports, analyses, discussion of ufological issues. These are all numbered.
Okay, that's the first one, all right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. There's something like 60 articles.
Okay, yeah, I see them now. Fantastic.
This collection is largely independent of the one that was in the papers.
Bookmarked, yeah. This is great info, people. Make sure you go to this site.
I don't think there's any other site quite like this one.
No, looks pretty inclusive.
This is all business.
Challenging the paradigm. Nice. Fantastic. Okay, now, before we get into... We've got a little bit of time before the next break. We have a break every half hour here. Let's go... Where did I want to go next? We'll just click over here. Tehran. The Tehran, Iran incident. Now, what do you know about that one? Did you get to check out anything from that at all?
Yeah, I was the first one to write a report on it.
Fantastic.
Let me see. Oh, it's number 20 on the going down on the opening page of my website, Iranian jets versus the unknown, and that was a case that occurred in September of 1976. This is before the Ayatollah took over, so it's still the Imperial Air Force of Japan, of Iran, and now what I wrote here is based on interviews that were made by other people, not me, but other people interviewed the air traffic controller who was on duty at the Tehran airport at the time, and let's see, there was a general. It's been a while since I've read through this, but there was a general who was interviewed, and I interviewed one of the employees of the American representative of one of the Air Force companies that make the airplanes. Anyway, in that particular event, it began when some phone calls, some people called up the air traffic control center in Tehran, saying that they had seen some strange object lights overhead in a place that was in the northeastern corner of Tehran. And they called the air traffic controller at the airport to find out what it was. And he ignored these phone calls at first, but after several of them describing the same thing, he got his binoculars, went to a window where he could look out over the area that these people were calling from, and he said to his surprise, he could see something was there. So he called up the Air Force General and told them. The Air Force General scrambled a jet from an airport, an Air Force airport that was 90-some miles away, I think it was.
Right.
Anyway, he scrambled the jet, and as the jet traveled, he could see this bright light flashing, and as it got close to about 25 miles from this bright light, the pilot reported that he lost control of his airplane, and so he pulled a quick U-ey, you might say, and headed for home, at which point the general launched the second aircraft. The second aircraft, what was his name? The driver of the second aircraft turned later on and became a Air Force general, and he's been interviewed in a number of times. And he said he was more explicit as to what happened. He's traveling along, and he can see this object from some 40 miles away, and he ended up chasing it. And at one point, it emitted a couple of lights that seemed to be the pilot thought was a threatening move by this, whatever it was, and he made a motion to launch one of his own things, at which point he said he lost control of his aircraft. He was able to do a steer. That was about it. He made a left turn and a sort of a dive, and as he turned away, he could see these smaller bright things go back. He says, a perfect rejoin with the main object.
Right. Wow.
It was a complicated series of events, and
I remember seeing the reenactment for it now on video as you were mentioning that. that would be pretty scary, being the guy in the jet.
Got interviewed and reconstructed sort of on one of the old Unsolved Mysteries type of. It was those Unsolved Mysteries, but one of those UFO shows.
Right.
I can't really think of the show right now, but they actually interviewed the pilot and the air traffic controller and put together a pretty good version. But if you read what I wrote here, you'll get a good idea of what happened.
There was a current affair. Unsolved Mysteries was another one.
Leslie Kean features this in her book about pilots and scientists and so on, or UFOs, pilots, scientists, and government officials and so on come testify. That's not exactly the right title, but she put it in her book of several years ago.
Okay, and what do we got over here? Now we're getting close to another break. The Gulf breeze. Now that's something I didn't get into. Somebody else said. I also have another show. I have a partner, Scorpio. On Wednesdays at noon, we do the Red Pill Roundtable. And offhand, I can't remember who was that brought it up. Actually, I think it was Scorpio was asking. Yeah, that's right. We were talking with Dan Willis and Steve Hudgens from MUFON, the international desk. And I guess, yeah, okay, we're almost at the break. So when we come back, I want to talk about the Gulf breeze incident. And we will be back in a few minutes.
Rittenhouse tries to control everything. But truth is, it's a struggle. They've always fought against outliers, rebels, JFK, MLK. And these days, they lose more control every year. I wonder if they could change it.
Change what? Change history?
Go back. In the mothership. Attack key moments in time until they get what they want. A reality in their image. Shiny, happy, brave new world. Sterile, clean, totally under their thumb.
Are you telling me that Rittenhouse wants to take the mothership back so they can nuke history even more than Flynn?
Sister, you ain't seen nothing yet.
All right, welcome back. I'm Steve Crawford. This is Factor Theory Live. I am here with Dr. Bruce Maccabee, optical physicist, and just all-around cool guy. Okay, Bruce, where did we leave off? We did talk Gulf breeze. The Red Bubba sightings, actually. I would like to find out about the Red Bubba sightings. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the Red Bubba sightings started in 1991. Well, there had been a couple of red light sightings before that. The real series started in 1991, and you're showing them here on the out of the what appears in my website.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
There's a very complex series of events. The first sighting night for the Gulf breeze sightings was November 11th, 1987, at 2:30 in the morning, when a dog woke up the dog's owner and wanted to go outside. And the owner figured that the dog wanted to go outside for the normal reason. Instead of when the dog got outside, it started looking up into the sky and barking at something. A lady looked up and saw this weird thing with a beam of light coming down and hitting her dog. And she said her first thought was, they're coming to get my dog. And she turned around back to bed. And she said, as I was falling asleep, I was thinking, well, I'll tell somebody about it tomorrow. But tomorrow never came until, well, it did actually, in a week or so. She did tell somebody about it. That's how we know about it. But she wouldn't have told anybody about it if it hadn't been for Ed allowing his pictures to be published. But this is the latter half of 1987, and the photos and so on that people mostly remember about the Gulf breeze stuff started in November of 1987, and then continued into 1988 until about the 10th of July of 1988, after which things calmed down somewhat. Up to that point, there had been hundreds of witnesses, and Ed Walters had taken quite a large number of photographs, and the story was extremely complicated. Other people saw the same thing that he did, so he sort of had company when it came to seeing this object. What made him different was he heard this hum in his head, he said, when one of these things appeared, and that sort of alerted him that maybe he should get his camera ready and take some pictures. Well, now, these sightings lasted what I call the first wave of sightings lasted until about July of 1988, and then there was a decrease in the sighting rate in Gulf Breeze area for a couple of years. And then in 1991, these red bubba sightings started, where some of them could have been special fireworks, I guess. The thing that characterized these was they would appear in the sky, someplace in the sky around the Gulf Breeze area, and travel a distance through the sky, and all of a sudden burst into flashing white light, and then it would die. And it could have been synthesized with pyrotechnics designed to have some red compound burn, or some compound that burns red light, burns, and then a compound that burns with white light with a flashing effect rather than just a steady burn. These sightings got to be so common that there were a group of people who went out just about every night from November 1990, I guess, all the way through September of 1992. And they had video cameras and binoculars and still cameras and tape recording and so on of these events. So they were data rich, you might say. And there were usually very many sightings. The largest sighting occurred in the spring of 1992, I think it was, when about 100 people saw one of these things happen. But the thing that took them out of the simple explanation is like a balloon blowing over the city and having fireworks go off on it, which, by the way, would be very dangerous and probably illegal, because if you had something like a road flare fall on a field of dry grass,
right,
bad quickly. Well, anyway, these lights very often were traveling not with the wind, if there was any wind, but not with the wind, but at some angle to it, or even crosswind, sometimes even against the wind. And it occurred to me that if this was going to be a hoax, because they didn't seem to be confined to traveling with the wind, it must be that at the very least had like a little engine, a model plane type of thing. Now, I went down there in September of 1991 because they had started seeing, instead of just a red light traveling along and then bursting into white flashes, they had started seeing rings of light, dots of light in a ring. And I was aware of all the stuff they had seen beforehand. We were collecting, I think they had 70 reports or something like that. I forget the number now, but I went down there, and while I was there, the first night I arrived, nothing happened. The second night that I was there, I was standing there I had taken a big ear, a so-called big ear microphone, a big dish with a microphone at the focal point to be able to collect very faint sounds. And I had a reason for doing that. As I said, I had decided that if these were hoaxes, they must have been using some sort of a propulsion, some sort of a thing like a model airplane.
Right.
To these along. And you could hear a model airplane from a long distance away. So I had this big ear microphone, and I also had my binoculars, and some lady yelled, "There it is." I looked up into the sky. Now, if you look up into the sky this evening, on this particular night, this is in Florida, the sky has almost always got moisture in it. The air has moisture. And there were ground lights from the city and also from a playing field in Gulf Breeze. And where we were standing at the south end of the Pensacola Bay Bridge, looking upwards into the sky, you could see sort of like a glow, the light reflected off the droplets of moisture in the haze. You couldn't see with your naked eye. The glow was too great for you to be able to see stars on the other side. But if you use your binoculars, you sort of cut through the glare, and you could see the stars on the other side. So anyway, this lady yells, "There it is!" She didn't say what, where. I just flipped my binoculars up to my eyes and sort of looked in the direction I had been looking, and sure enough, there it was. A ring of lights. I had a tape recorder going, and I turned that on and counted this. I can see eight lights, 8 dots of light in a ring. I grabbed the parabolic microphone, and that was also coupled to the tape recorder, and so it had my earphones on it. I pointed the microphone towards this light as it was moving through the sky at a slow rate, and I didn't hear a thing. I strained to hear something, but I couldn't hear a thing. Now, I thought about if it was a hoax, or even if it wasn't a hoax, there must have been some sort of a structure holding these lights in position.
Right.
And the way the haze worked, the haze, the object could be in front of the haze, that is at lower altitude than the haze was, in which case it would be maybe a few hundred or 1,000 feet away, upwards at a steep angle, maybe 50 to 60 degree angle upwards from my position. And then if the object was close to me on the lower side of the haze, I should be able to see the structure holding the lights as silhouetted against the haze.
Right.
So using binoculars, I strained to see some sort of a dark structure associated with these lights. Never did see anything. Thinking about it later on, I thought, well, now if the haze extends upwards a certain distance, like maybe a mile from the ground upwards, and this thing, I can't see the structure because the haze is in the way. Either the thing is closer than the haze, and I can see the structure because of a sort of shadowing effect, or it was on the other side of the haze, and not being an illuminated structure, the haze would have blocked the vision. So I decided it must have been at least a mile away. It would have been maybe 10 or 15, 20 feet in diameter, based on the image size on the cameras. And so that's all described in my article you already looked at on the Bubba sightings. Right. They continued through the end of 1991 and into 1992. And they had some spectacular events, I guess.
Wow.
But anyway, I could certainly accept that this is a hoax, but it's got to be able to do something. Now, right now, you're looking at pictures taken in Pensacola, with an infrared camera with infrared film in it. And if you look at the little light that's in the box in these pictures, the bright lights are street lights, but the little light in the box, the first photo you see it, then you go to the next photo. This little light was going upwards, and the next photo.
Yeah. That's moving forward.
Third photo, it's brighter. Is there another photo? I can't remember.
Yes, there is. Where it's
right
in your face.
Hmm?
It looks like it's right in your face at this one.
So it was going upwards, and it was very dim at first, and then it became very bright. And the people looking at it, they had their recollections of watching this light. They said it started off bright, and then got dim. Well, now you have to ask yourself, how could that be? If the camera shows it was originally dim and then got brighter, doesn't that contradict the witness testimony that initially it was bright and then it got dim before it disappeared? And the answer is the photos were taken with infrared film.
Right.
And if you assume that the brightness depends on the amount of infrared light, when it was down low, the first couple of pictures, it was a dim infrared, so it doesn't make a bright image. And then it changed to being a brighter infrared image in the third and fourth photos. And suddenly it changed its spectrum, is what I'm getting at. Instead of having a spectrum that was dim in the infrared and bright in the visible to begin with, it switched the spectrum so that at the end it was bright in the infrared and dim in the visible,
Right.
like moving the optical energy from visible down into infrared.
That's pretty incredible.
You can try other explanations, but the photos have stored the data forever, you might say. And it's your job to come up and explain it. And the way you have as relatives and reference points, a bunch of in those pictures you have a bunch of streetlights which don't change at all. So it's not like Ed who took the pictures in the presence of a bunch of other people. It's not like he did something to change the brightness of the object.
Yeah, so that's pretty much still open then, you would think. I would have to think, wow.
Something that changes is that ring of lights there is something that Ed got with one of his special cameras.
Right.
This is all described in great detail. The self-reference stereo camera was used to take this picture right here.
Okay, next I wanted to get into Billy Meyer. You're a believer, I take it, in Billy's pictures?
Well, if you
some at least
discussed on the website, if you let me see, I think you have to go upwards on the website. You keep going upwards and keep your eye looking to the left. You'll see.
Oh,
Billy Meyer. I like to talk about New Zealand saying, "Oh, you went too far."
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. And Billy, yeah, I saw it on the scroll down here. Where the heck is it? Billy. Okay, Ken Arnold. So Billy's got to be shortly after that.
Myers ship. Where'd it go?
It was before the Red Bubba, wasn't it?
Yes. It's there somewhere.
Right
there.
Sorry about that.
Click on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's get down to some pictures. Or is remote link?
There should be pictures appearing. I don't know about that stuff. Please upgrade your account.
Okay, here's a couple.
There we go.
Figure 17.
This picture is made of taking pictures out of a series of frames, 16, 15, 14, 10, 13, 12.
Right. So that
Well, anyway,
it's got like a pendulum swing to it, it looks like.
Right. I say, it's, oddly enough, it's consistent with being a pendulum. That's figure 17. Back it up.
Oh, back it up?
Yeah.
For some reason, that's the first picture that showed up.
I don't know what this... I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's messed up. they want me to spend money to look at this. That's messed up. Well, is there anything lower, or do they have more of that? That's pretty crazy. And then again, it could be me again. Yes, see, then we just get into
the bottom line is, if you take a weight and hang it from a string, and you move the top of the string you're holding it with back and forth, you make it go as a planar pendulum. If it stays in a forward, backward direction, all is swinging is in a plane, plane. And this shows a number of pictures. The reason for the white arc, that would be where you would expect this pendulum. If it were a pendulum, this is where you would expect it to lie.
Right.
You swing on that arc. That arc has to do is determined by the length of the pendulum string.
Now, 12 does appear to be lower, a little bit below what the arc would be, but I guess that would just depend on if the person holding the string lowered their hand a little bit.
None of these things are perfect, you have to understand.
Yeah.
But you got enough of a sense of the idea right there. Now, it just so happens that there's another type of pendulum. The planar pendulum stays in a vertical plane. I hope you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, right. Yeah, I do, actually. Yeah.
The other type is a conical pendulum, where the weight swings around in a circle. You have to make a circular motion with the top of the pendulum, and then you can get it to swing in a circle.
Right.
Now, the type of thing that a physicist would know, but the average person wouldn't, is that the period of a planar pendulum is determined by the length of the string, and the period of a conical pendulum is the same period if the string is the same length as the planar pendulum. So what I did was he has a bunch of frames in this movie which look like it's swinging in like a conical pendulum. It comes towards you and away from you, whereas with a planar pendulum it stays at about the same distance and goes left and right. But the conical pendulum goes around in a circle. The period of the conical pendulum also is determined by the length of the string, and the fact that it agreed in this Meyer film tells me that Semyozi was able to make her spacecraft travel the way a pendulum would, even though there's no reason for it, I guess. She could have done it. On the other hand, if Billy had some help, he could have somebody swinging the pendulum while he films it. He didn't appear in the film. This is his first. I think it was his first movie.
Right.
And so I analyzed his first movie, came up with a theory that it was a pendulum, and said I can't say that Billy never had an experience, but I don't use his pendulum video as evidence for UFOs.
Yeah, I can't believe he actually popped that one out to be as evidence. With some of the things he has put out, that if they are real, there was, so then we don't, well, actually, let's see a second. How long is this? Yeah, it's too long. Because there was a clip from a movie about Billy on Amazon Prime Video, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it doesn't have Billy's name in the title. But they did an analysis of the audio he presented and video and pictures, different video than that pendulum one, because actually I've only seen that once myself. But they couldn't prove it to be fake. Like, so it's a head scratcher. If he was faking, then bravo for a guy with one arm and a broken camera. Jeez.
Well, as far as the pendulum video is concerned, you could play it, and you would see at the very beginning the pendulum, the UFO is at the bottom of the screen, and It's got its fastening pole or whatever straight up. It's like this number 14 at the beginning of the film, and then you see it move slowly upward, slowly to the left and up, like towards 15 and 16.
Right.
It almost goes completely off the screen, and then I hesitate to use the term. He lets go and it swings to the right, and goes all the way to the right to where number 12 is, and then it swings back through the middle to number 16 again, and keeps swinging back and forth like that. I hate to say it, but like I said, that's the curve of a pendulum. It's maintaining a constant distance from a fixed point. The fixed point is the suspension point at the top of the string, and it's maintaining a constant. Now, I don't know why you're getting this weird crap. It tells you not to do something.
Yeah, that's messed up. I don't know if anybody else is getting this, if anybody's online on his site where you're listening. It says for me, it says remote linking forbidden. Free servers does not link support remote linking.
Free server is the name of the host company that my website is on, freeservers.net.
That's odd. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, there should be music coming on any second.
I've never seen that stuff when I look at it, so it must be something about the way you're taking it.
It's okay. There's the music. We will be back on the other side for the last half hour. Stick around, people.
Quench your thirst while we all bond. Don't wait, reach for a reach. Yeah, in strawberry, mango, or in peach, reach for a reach.
From LexCorp and The Reach.
This consumable contains the Reach's additive, which combines microscopic quantities of two chemicals. One is a dopamine polymerase, the other an adrenaline inhibitor. Taken over generations, they will slowly addict the entire population to Reach and make the people of Earth placid, literally incapable of revolt.
All right, welcome back to Factor Theory Live. I'm Steve Crawford, here with Dr. Bruce Maccabee. All right, Bruce, before we came on air tonight, I had sent you a little clip and a little picture, and I'm going to play that clip now. I'm sure some of the people listening have heard it before, and I'm sure there's some that haven't. So this is a clip of Admiral Byrd from a long time ago on a show called The Longines Chronoscope, and he brings up, when he goes down to Antarctica, how he sees some land beyond the poles that never been seen by another person before. So here's that clip.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines. Good evening, this is Frank Knight. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope? Larry Lasser, CBS News correspondent, and Kenneth Crawford, National Affairs Editor of Newsweek magazine. Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
The North Pole used to be a no-man's land, but these are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. You know, only 60 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Well, Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do.
Well, Admiral, would you say that since you've been to both the extremities of Earth, are these expeditions to such far-off places, are they getting easier because of modern techniques, or is danger still close at hand?
All right. Now, that clip, I find it odd how these guys just kind of skip right over the fact that Admiral Byrd said that there is a chunk of land just beyond the South Pole that is the size of America that no man has ever seen before. Now, Bruce, I know you're not much for speculation when it comes to Antarctica and stuff, but I brought up that clip because it's shortly around the time that it was alleged that the Nazis, just before, well, actually, it proven this wasn't alleged, just before World War II, they had sent down New Schwabenland, and that's what they had grabbed some land down there, took subs and boats down there, and he had gone down himself, Admiral Byrd, at some point for Operation High Jump. I was curious, do you think that it is possible that Hitler and the Nazis did have some sort, and I know we're just getting to theory and speculation here, but do you think it's possible that back then Hitler and the Nazis had access to some sort of UFO tech?
I don't think so. I'm well aware
so?
of all the stories that go circulating around about things that look like flying saucers that were supposedly built, and whether models, maybe one of them flew somewhat. That'd be about the best you could imagine the Nazis having done. Took a long time for us to be able to build a circular aircraft that ran by having fans blow air downwards real hard to provide support for the saucer-shaped plane itself, and it was just too difficult to control. They could do it now, perhaps, with computer control of the fan blade or the fans, to make a continual, steady downwards force in reaction, an upwards force in reaction to the air being blown down. But I don't think the Nazis had anything. I don't expect the Nazis had any anti-gravity or really bizarre type of physics involved that we don't know about, like bending space and so on. We can talk about such stuff, but to actually go ahead and do it.
Yeah, it's a whole nother story. Okay, where did I want
to... A bold pronouncement tonight that the Navy, or whoever does the investigations that we've been seeing in this UFO show, the most recent episode was last night.
Okay.
I would predict that the Navy investigation will end up proving that we are not alone. There are non-human intelligences messing around in our atmosphere. NHI, keep that in mind. They were very careful last night in this episode, as they were discussing the situation of observables, that, well, these observables can be used to decide whether something is conventional or unconventional, like the observable of acceleration. If you have a normal acceleration, it could be done by a normal aircraft or a rocket or something like that, by throwing stuff out the back end fast enough to accelerate the main body forward.
Right.
But this is one of the observables for these craft. You don't see them speed up. They may be hovering there at a moment and suddenly just traveling at a constant rate to some new place. You don't see them speed up. You don't see them slow down. They just suddenly are at a velocity that takes them from point A to point B, and they stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the observables that tells you this is abnormal, not normal. And they were very careful in their discussions last night, on this episode last night, to not come out and say, well, it looks like we definitely have company. They sort of admitted that there was something to be considered, but they are reluctant to rule out all possible human-built stuff.
That's pretty important, though, in itself, that they seem like they're on the fence, you would say?
What?
Would you say like they were presenting it as if they were not certain one way or another? Not saying it's true, but we're not saying it's not type of a thing?
Yeah, something like that. We can't prove that it was a conventional craft, but we can't prove that it's unconventional either. And my claim is that they will end up, and this comes from a former Navy physicist, myself, that the Navy investigation will find out that the only solution to these, the only things that agree with all the observables as some sort of a manufactured craft, we presume, but not manufactured by human beings, manufactured by somebody else, somewhere. And I use as evidence a case from 40 some years ago. What was the famous New Zealand sighting of December 1978?
Oh, okay.
Where they were flying along the coast of the South Island of New Zealand. They're flying parallel to the east coast of the South Island of New Zealand. When very strange things happened, where the ground radar in Wellington, looking southward towards where the plane was going, flying south, the radar at Wellington was picking up point targets that moved around, and they would exist at one point for maybe one sweep of this radar. That was 12 seconds per rotation for the radar. They would maybe stay there for one sweep or another sweep, and then suddenly be gone and pop up someplace many miles away, having traveled that distance in 12 seconds or less. But there's a series of events involving these abnormal targets the radar was picking up, in which there was a target behind the aircraft, and then it was beside the aircraft at 3 o'clock at 4 miles, according to the air traffic controller who was monitoring the radar. This thing was 3 o'clock at 4 miles. And by the way, this is all tape recorded, so we can replay the whole thing. It's a data-rich event. After being for a sweep or so at 3 o'clock at 4 miles, all of a sudden the radar operator said, "You have something flying in formation with you. Your target has doubled in size." Now, if you think about what it would require to make the radar target of the airplane twice as large as it should be. This is a bit technical, but the only thing you could do that would be if you turn the plane sideways so that you change the radar cross-section as seen by the Wellington radar and the air traffic control radar. But the plane was flying in a straight line. It didn't change its rotation. So it's very much suspicious that this target that was at 3 o'clock, that is to the right side of the airplane, 3 o'clock at 4 miles, moved to where it was within, so close to the airplane that the radar could not resolve the two. It just made a big blob on the radar screen. And that lasted for at least 36 seconds. So there was a sizable time, at least three sweeps of the radar. This target was big, and then the air traffic controller reported to the plane that the airplane target had returned to normal size. And then there was he had the target at 3 o'clock at 4 miles, which stayed steady as the airplane flew along. Now, I think about this more. There are the technical aspects of it. How could it happen? And it appears that this unknown target, whatever it was, must be what caused must have added its radar cross section to that of the plane, which means it got really close to the airplane. We don't know how close. And then it moved away. To me, this shows clear intent on the part of the radar target to...
Oh, absolutely. Intelligently controlled.
Comes from behind the plane, comes up to the side of the plane, several miles away, zooms into the being within a mile of the plane, stays there for half a minute, then zooms back out to 4 miles at 3 o'clock, and then sits there and waits as the plane continues along. That to me tells you there's more than just an accident. This isn't just unintelligent phenomena going on. There's evidence of intent to do something. When you get up close, you ride along beside something, then all of a sudden you zoom or as close to it as you can get, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly how it was, and then it moves away.
That's definitely not swamp gas, that's for sure.
The strange way of these things moving around, when I did the analysis of the New Zealand case way back 40 years ago, I thought, well, maybe these strange radar targets are not the same target going from one place to another, but new targets that are suddenly being created by, if it were possible, turbulence in the atmosphere or something. In other words, my first thought was that there was no great speed involved. You just have to have a turbulent spot in the atmosphere that stays there for a few seconds and then diminishes, and another turbulent spot appears somewhere else. But now,
I see what you're saying.
These discoveries of how fast these things can go, like in this Tic Tac incident, we're told of a situation where one of the jets has just had an interaction with some strange object, a Tic Tac, and the shipboard radar monitoring this whole thing says the target is no longer near you. It's already gone to your CAP cap point. It traveled some 30 miles in less than a second.
Yeah, and they didn't even know where that cap point was going to be, but yet that thing was there when they got there, right?
Right.
That was insane. Yeah, Bob Lazar was talking about that on Joe Rogan's podcast on YouTube, and he talked about some pretty incredible things. Actually, what do you think about Bob Lazar?
Well, a mystery wrapped up in an enigma.
Definitely, yeah, that's a good way to put it. I honestly believe him. This guy hasn't gotten anything out of this, nothing but headaches, actually, for coming out. Yeah. And when he started talking about some of the things he wasn't involved in, but he had heard about, he was briefed on, like Project Looking Glass. Like, now I know for you that's going into the fantastical, but actually, like Dr. Michael Sala, I was talking to him and Dan Willis about it, and it's mind-blowing to think about that they could use something like that. If it's true, it would most likely be Tesla tech, derived somehow from Tesla tech, I would think, and that they could use that as a weapon. And he was about to explain how, and Joe Rogan cut him off and changed the subject. I was like, no, what are you doing, man? Oh.
Well, one of the things that bothers me about him is he talks about element 115 as being the source of power or whatever it is to travel from one place to another by bending space, I guess, and sucking yourself from one place to where it is you want to go. And he made described this capability of the element 115 when we only had elements up to 110 or something like that. We hadn't made element 115 yet. It was not a natural thing. It had to be made. Well, anyway, he claims that element 115 was part of the what made the transporter work.
Right.
And it was because of the element 115 being able to warp space somehow or other. What bothers me is the element 115 is made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, just like element 114, 113, 112, 110, 116, and so on. And so what was different about the protons and neutrons and electrons in 115 that made it able to warp space and the others above it and below it couldn't? It didn't seem to make any sense that element 115, there's something magic in the number 115.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. What's magic about this element that all of a sudden we can use it to warp space and time?
They've made
but
some,
just because we can't understand it doesn't mean, doesn't mean it's not possible. Stranger things, as far as I'm concerned. I've seen some pretty spectacular things in the sky myself, but I've always been alone. That's why I haven't bothered really talking a whole lot about them. But there's been things like strange flashes in the sky that you'll see something moving in a polar orbit, so you know it's not a satellite. It's way too high to be a plane or a helicopter. And the fact that it's going in a polar orbit just is amazing to me.
There are some satellites that go in polar orbits.
There are some satellites you're saying that may be doing polars? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's new information for me. The last I had heard, no satellites moved in a polar orbit. So, okay. Now I'll have to revise my thoughts.
They generally don't launch them in a polar orbit because it takes more energy to do so. You can launch towards the east and gain rotation of the Earth speed of 1,000 miles an hour just by going to the east. If you try to do a polar orbit, you don't get any help from the rotation of the Earth. But the polar orbit is necessary if you want to cover the whole Earth.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, actually. Yeah. They also said, well, I don't know if this is true, but that no satellites are allowed to go over the North Pole for some reason, unless they're government.
Never heard of that. It might be. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to look that. That was like 10 years ago I heard that, so I'd really have to do some research to check that out. But it was probably a YouTube video. But what do you think about Space Force and the possibility that may help actually speed up disclosure a wee bit?
Well, I think disclosure is going to come probably long before there's a major Space Force. It seems to me that we may be on the threshold of disclosure because, as I said, I'm willing to predict what the Navy is going to find, and they're going to find that out quickly. They've run out of explanations. Let's put it like that. When you run out of explanations for something, then what do?
You don't think it's possible that these things were actually ours? Back engineered?
What?
The ones that were seen, I'm talking about. Yeah.
What are you talking about?
The ones for the Tic Tac ones?
Oh, yes.
Because that's what I was thinking, too. I was talking with Dan and Michael about that as well. It's possible that that's some of the back engineered stuff, and it's ours, and they were testing it out to see if they could detect it and how much of it they could detect and things like that. But then again, that's just speculation. We do know it was something.
Like reverse engineering of the Roswell crash.
It would have to be.
That may be. It may have happened. It may not. As the reverse engineering. My own thought when I first confronted with this way back in the late 70s when the Roswell case was sort of rediscovered because it was more or less forgotten from 1947 until 1978 or 79.
Right. Stanton Friedman went after it.
Right. My thought was, well, they would have covered it up because of its relationship to warfighting capability. Whoever has flying saucers wins. So we want to cover it up. Because we don't want our enemies to find out that we've got one, because they might try to get one and they might get it first. So if we've got one, we bottle it up. But then we're confronted with a technology that's so far beyond us that we can't figure it out. So my thought was they would bring in some of the most brilliant scientists to look over this crash material as much as they could, and they would run up against a dead end as to understanding what's going on, and they would bottle it up for 5 or 10 years, and then bring in a new collection of scientists and let them try to figure out what it is. And if it's still unknown, they bottle it up for another 5 or 10 years. Keep doing this investigation, you might say, try to do reverse engineering or whatever every 5 or 10 years. As our own technology improves, we ultimately, presumably, would catch up to whatever is in the Roswell crash material.
Wow. I would give anything if Project Looking Glass was real to be able to just to see a peek or what have, or find like a film or something of that crash would be spectacular. Bruce, I want to thank you for getting back to me and for sticking around for the whole 2 hours. Everyone, this has been Dr. Bruce Maccabee. Make sure you check out his website. What was the site again, Bruce?
BRUMAC.MYSITE.com. brumac.mysite.com.
Awesome. And once again, this will be replayed. Bruce, I'll be making a copy of it, and I'll give you the link for that for you to post for friends. Everybody, this is Steve Crawford, Factor Theory Live. Donate some money. Have yourselves a great night. It was great talking to you, Bruce. You have a great night.
Thank you. It's been nice and stimulating.
It was, and we'll be back in touch soon.